I'm never as a leader going to have everybody on my team having a great day. I'm going to have days where I win deals, lose deals. I can't have this emotional whiplash. I have to show up consistent and steady for everybody. So that was a key moment.
Everyone wants to build stronger pipeline, but only a few know how to make it happen. If you're listening to this show, you know Outbound is not dead. You just need a little help building a system that actually works. Well, you're in the right place. I'm Todd Busler, and on this show, we're breaking down the plays, processes, and frameworks behind repeatable pipeline growth, straight from the people who built it. Let's get into it. Hey everyone, you're gonna love today's guest, Kyle Asay. You might have seen him writing about sales introverts, and he has a big following on LinkedIn. Today, we didn't spend time on that. We spent time on what he learned during great runs at companies like Qualtrics and MongoDB, and exactly how his first couple quarters have gone, transitioning LaunchDarkly from a heavy inbound model to a very outbound focused motion. He shared exactly how he increased outbound pipeline generation by 142% in the first 3 months at LaunchDarkly, and how he reduced the time of first sale from 65 down to 33 days. If you're an aspiring sales leader or a sales leader joining a new company, this episode is for you. Tactics, strategies, tips, failure points, etc. Also, stick around about 3/4 of the way in. He talks about how he evaluates opportunities, what are the most important things when looking at a new opportunity, and the advice he finds himself giving reps when they're thinking about a new opportunity. Enjoy. Kyle, happy Friday. How we doing?
I'm doing well, Todd. How are you?
I'm great. I appreciate you doing this. You're one of the few people that puts out sales content that I find sharing with my team a lot. Just on like frameworks, and you can tell someone that's like, all right, you're doing it. You've earned the right to say all the things you're saying. And I think your ability to put complicated concepts in like short, pithy frameworks is a real skill. So kudos to you, and thank you for the value you deliver to me and my team.
Thank you. I very appreciate the kind words.
Qualtrics, MongoDB, LaunchDarkly, you've built and rebuilt and scaled teams. What's been the common thread across these runs?
The common thread, There's a few common threads. I think the things that I find super consistent are the traits that I look for in the AEs that I hire. The traits are the same, the skills might be different. Another common thread is going to be the emphasis on PG, which is why we're here today. I've always been in an environment where the expectation is that AEs own and source a good amount of their pipeline. And so building out systems that allow AEs to supplement marketing, SDR, et cetera, has been another major consistency.
Let's dive into one of them, LaunchDarkly. I saw a stat increase pipeline by, north of 130, 140% in the first couple months. Doing that at a LaunchDarkly scale of company is not easy. There's so many moving pieces. There's politics, there's structure, there's commission. What could you equate maybe or summarize the top 2 or 3 reasons or levers you pulled to make that happen?
So the first thing we did is we recognized that we had 3 distinct types of accounts that we were not correctly approaching for PG. We had our net new business accounts, we had our enterprise tier customers, and then we have our self-serve PLG type motion customers. And so I realized the AEs were treating a lot of these accounts in generally similar ways, which wasn't optimized. So the first step was creating now a PG plan where we separated these 3 accounts. We taught, here's how they're different. Here's the different approaches you use against these 3 distinct categories. And then here's how you prioritize the urgency for how you select each of these accounts. Because before I came, account selection approach was literally just a random customer this week and then almost alphabetical order for new business accounts. And so teaching the distinct approach to 3 different kinds of accounts for PG, and then nailing territory management so we could focus where we had the highest propensity and highest upside was the foundation to it. And then we got into all the aspects on understanding the personas, understanding good messaging on the customer side, understanding the framework of problems that we're currently solving, problems we should be solving, all those things layer on top of it. But honestly, it began with, look, we need to actually narrow our scope to the top tier of these 3 distinct buckets and teach how to approach those and then layer on a bunch of plays off of that.
How did you get there, Kyle? Because I'm sure there was other good sales talent and leadership that got LaunchDarkly to where they were before you got there. But how did you arrive on, oh, wow, everyone's treating different accounts the same? Or how did you arrive on like, hey, no, it's these 3 account types and this is how we have to kind of strategize accordingly?
When I first joined, I just met with every single person in my org. I didn't just talk to the managers that I led. I met with the SDRs, the AEs, international reps, and it was walk me through your workflow. Show me how you pick an account. Show me your territory. How do you think about PG planning? And so I was looking for patterns. Where are the areas that are working? And then where are their common mistakes? And the common mistake that I saw was everybody's territory had no structure. So it was show me your territories. Well, here's a list of accounts. Well, which ones are your best accounts? I don't know. And so I see this thread, and it's very different than when I joined Mongo, because Mongo was at a very different maturity stage. When I joined Mongo, they knew their best accounts. They had that tiering in. So we started a little bit further along that pipeline generation maturity funnel. But at LaunchDarkly, which is really fun for me, it was really back to the absolute basics. And since then, we've significantly matured how we think about our account planning, PG planning. But man, it was just going in, how do you do it today? What are the few things working well that we can magnify? And then what is the lowest common denominator for a point of failure? And the lowest common denominator for point of failure is the average AE waking up every day with not going after the right accounts in their patch.
And do you think most of that was a lack of understanding on their end, or just too much decisions and then therefore that you were losing productivity? Like once you've been able to make that adjustment, obviously it led to the big results, but was there some early wins there as well?
So you get the right to stack on additional plays for PG by getting the early wins. So when I came in, there was a lot of the skepticism, more leadership turnover, more leadership change. Who's this guy kind of a thing? The reality is the team had been built off of a very inbound heavy motion. Great product, large market, lots of inbounds. They'd been able to hit their number for a long time off of just inbounds. Now that had dried up and gone away, which is why they brought in people like me and some others to help rebuild the outbound standpoint. Once you get some of the early wins and they see, hey, actually prioritizing my accounts, I found an expansion opportunity much faster, then you earn the right to layer on more and more and more. And so one of the things that I'm most excited about is through all the transformation we've done, we've actually had very low attrition from the reps that we wanted to buy in and stay because they saw some of the early wins. The skepticism began to go away. And now they're like, yeah, we'll try anything because so far as we had is a lot of money. So we're in to do more of this.
Funny, once it starts to work, you see everyone lean in on a lot of that skepticism, side chatter going away. Can you dive in a little bit deeper on okay, figure out these 3 different account types and then nail kind of the territory planning. How big of a change was the territory planning part? How did you approach it?
It was a pretty significant change because reps had very large territories and there wasn't a lot of structure or planning to it. And so getting their mindset away from trying to talk to all their accounts to just the top tier of accounts of each kind, that was a pivot. Understanding that we're not just going to reach out to 2 or 3 people per account. We're going to go a whole lot wider. Learning things like we're not just trying to set meetings at the VP level or CTO level. We're trying to go get a point of view, but talking to below the line contacts to build up to the executive. All of those things were pretty significant changes in the operating rhythm, and just huge kudos to the reps that were here when I joined because they did buy in. The trajectory was so much faster because so many of these reps took the coaching, gave feedback, helped us improve what I was suggesting, took ownership of it, and that helped us get where we are today a whole lot faster than if they would have been reluctant, not bought in, and not been coachable.
Love that. One topic I've become a little bit obsessed with is, you've seen what great looks like. MongoDB is a great sales organization. Some of those leaders have gone to do on really good things. I find that there's only so many parts of a previous playbook that transfer over, right? Different stage company, different buyers. What were things that were very different from other playbooks that you've seen well? And you've seen it at Qualtrics and MongoDB. They're like on Mount Rushmore, right, of sales execution. What didn't transfer over? Or what did you think maybe would have transferred? Or you're like, hey, actually, this is going to be very different here.
So a lot of the playbook is similar, but the order of operations has been very different. So like I rolled out just this quarter, a year in, something that I rolled out within a month of joining MongoDB, just because of the maturity stage of the org that I was inheriting. But some of the pivots have been fun at LaunchDarkly because we have less constraints than we had at a much larger company like MongoDB. So for example, at MongoDB, territory management is very hard on the acquisition side. Because if there was an account that had spent like 23 cents 3 months ago on an Atlas cluster, we couldn't work that account And so trying to find the right accounts to call was much harder than it has been at LaunchDarkly. It's definitely some of the higher accountability things that I was able to implement sooner at Mongo because the culture was already partially there compared to at LaunchDarkly where I couldn't drive that right from the get-go because it would have caused too much whiplash. The playbook at LaunchDarkly, it took me more time to earn the right than it did at Mongo because the LaunchDarkly was very rudimentary when it came to outbound.
Doing what you're kind of glossing over is really hard. Like getting some of the OG reps that have been there and they said, hey, I've done well here. Who's this guy, Kyle? Like you mentioned going around, learning what wasn't working, kind of summarizing that information. I'm sure you were thoughtful about how quickly you made certain changes. Was there anything else you have for maybe this up and coming VP of sales that's like, all right, how do I get buy-in from some of this existing team?
Yeah, I also heard from the team things that they really needed, and I made them happen as quickly as possible. So like some common feedback I got was we don't really understand career progression. We just have the corporate AE and then enterprise AE. There's really no way to get there. The territories are so different. And so one of my biggest initial projects was building out a whole leveling system. I promoted a large portion of the org after my first 6 months. And I walked through how we were going to get there. And so when the AE see, hey, this guy is actually fighting to make the improvements that we said we need, maybe I'll give a shot at the improvements that he thinks we need.
Yeah.
And then you have that magic mesh where the improvements that they need, we made happen. The improvements
and you're delivering on them,
And now we're both delivering for each other. And now we have this culture where, look, we have each other's backs. We're going to go win together. But yeah, I think if you're the up-and-coming sales leader, you earn the right by one, getting them the wins that are important to them, okay? Assuming that they're good wins. So you can't just go get everything done that every rep asked for. Then the other piece is I'm really thinking, what can I roll out first that's going to make this team more money? Because if all the first initiatives you roll out, the reps are not seeing an immediate impact to their commission check, you're not going to get the buy-ins. Like if you're an upcoming leader, you're going to hear a lot about the most important thing in sales leadership is to know the names of your reps, spouses, and kids, to know their hobbies, to know them personally. And I think that's all super important thing. I really do. But I honestly don't think it's the most important. If you're a sales leader, most of your reps are working to make money, not for fun. As much fun as we all have in sales, that we're all here to make a paycheck. Implement things that show you care about your reps earning money, getting better at the job, earning promotions. As they see that happen, they're going to buy into you so much faster.
It's amazing advice. Kyle, another thing I really like about what you put out there is, look, you've had some really impressive runs and your career's escalated quickly, but you're also really open about sharing some missteps or mistakes or learnings. Was there any like key inflection points where things started to click for you or a really big learning opportunity things worth sharing that ultimately helped you get where you've gotten?
I've gotten some really impactful feedback in my career that I consider to be inflection moments. There was one as an early leader where a rep told me that, Kyle, when you're stressed and when you're down, we all know it, and it impacts all of us. So that was kind of a punch in the gut and a realization that I'm never as a leader going to have everybody on my team having a great day. I'm going to have days where I win deals, lose deals. I can't have this emotional whiplash. I have to show up consistent and steady for everybody. So that was a key moment. I've gotten feedback on how I tend to come to a decision because I can think it through and I can make a decision. But if I don't walk people through how I get to that decision, it can come across as being rushed and ill thought out. So I've learned to go explain my thought process in more depth to get more buy-in cross-functionally, especially. Man, like the longer I'm in sales, the more I realize that I'm never going to be able to say, this is what works. But more of, here's what I think is most likely to work. We're going to try it, cross our fingers to see what happens. And a lot of the time we're going to fail miserably, but we're going to bounce back anyway and try something different.
2 points. The last one you just meant, it's like, I've been talking to a lot of great sales leaders through this podcast. I'm really enjoying it. But a common thread is what you just said. There's the more traditional, been there, done that. That's like, no, this is it. This is what works. And the common thread I see with people like yourself, I just talked to the VP of sales at DBT who had an amazing run. Same Ryan Heinig from ThoughtSpot. It's like, I don't know. This is what I think is best. Here's how we're going to try and measure it. Like, because you don't know. And every company's different and market's different and timing in the cycles is different. So it's a common theme. And then to your first point, I actually got that same exact feedback from a CRO. And he said, Todd, hey, when we're doing great, your energy is incredible, but you're wearing your emotions on your sleeve, and whether you like it or not, it's affecting people. So that was something I had to deal with as well, and a good learning for me, and very grateful for that feedback, although it felt like a little bit of gut punch at the moment. Where do you see most sales orgs go wrong, right? So you just mentioned some really tactical and things that you've done. Where do you see people go wrong when it comes to outbound strategy, rep productivity, or rep accountability, and making some of the changes that you mentioned?
I'll consider it the whiplash effect. It's when organizations, they swing the pendulum so heavily, and then they make drastic changes when it doesn't work as expected. And so you're going from a heavy strategy over here and then almost completely reversing to another strategy when it's not working as expected. And so what I found with outbound strategy, with sales process strategy, you cannot make multiple big changes at once. You need to kind of pick your lane, test it, see what works, and then optimize and tweak as necessary. But I think a lot of orgs say, well, that didn't work. Let's change 3 variables. Let's change account process. Let's change messaging. Let's change our sequence strategy. Let's change our dialer. And all of a sudden, maybe one of those 4 or 5 changes are actually a good change, but how are you going to know? Because there's so many new variables in the mix. So I think that's probably the most common mistake.
How detailed are you, Kyle, in that? Super concretely, do you have almost like a kind of sprint cycle mentality, much like a product team, and says, here's exactly what we're doing for the next 90 days and how we're going to measure it? And then second question is, how do you get a gut check on how much change is too much? Are you going to a CEO, some mentors in your network? Like, how do you approach that? Because the balance is tricky.
I do get a lot of feedback from my CRO on hey, is this, am I thinking about this the right way? I try to follow a certain rule set. So first, I keep the same outcome metrics constant. I have the same 3 things I measure, and I always measure those. It's this quarter's revenue, this quarter's AE sourced pipeline, and next quarter's pipeline coverage. Those are my 3 outcome metrics. Every rep in my org knows it. Every leader knows it. Those are for performance management, health of the business. I do not change those. Now, the way that we drive to those can shift a little bit, and that's based on these sprint cycles, I guess you could say, the priorities that I have to support those. But I have another rule for those. If I ever introduce a new focus area, I have to remove a current one. And so that way I'm never doing too much. I'm not just building on and on and on and on and making this very complicated pipe gen process. And it's so funny because I remember I presented my original pipe gen strategy to the CEO at LaunchDarkly. And his first feedback was, this is so simple. I was like, yeah, that's the idea. So I think a lot of sales leaders want to go dress up these presentations, make it seem super complex. But if you're trying to roll out anything organization-wide and anybody in your org thinks it's complex, almost guaranteed it's not going to work. But that's my general thought process with the outcome metrics, inputs, how frequently I can change them, and then how I think about simplicity versus complexity.
So you mentioned the 3 top things you looked at, right? Or you're always constant. Did they have that same level of focus on those 3 things beforehand? Was that new to the organization? Obviously, they looked at it, but it wasn't with the same rigor you were. Can you talk about that a little bit?
No, they were really only looking at this quarter's revenue when I joined for my org. And so that's why there was a lot of inconsistency. So the reason why I like those 3 metrics is 1, they're highly controllable by the rep, with revenue being the one that's least controllable, at least for this quarter. Like we have a longer sales cycle. I can't tell a rep halfway through this forecasting a big miss, figure this out. Like there's not as much in their control, but it's still obviously our most critical metric. But this quarter's AE source pipeline, always controllable. Next quarter's pipeline coverage, always controllable. And if I have a rep that's struggling for revenue this quarter, but they're self-sourcing pipeline to complement marketing sourced and SDR sourced, and they have strong pipeline coverage for next quarter, they're in great standing. They're going to go deliver a great quarter next quarter, and I've got reps this quarter blowing through their number to help close the gap for this rep this quarter. And I found that very few sales orgs actually think about next quarter's pipeline as much as they probably should. I think it's commonly talked about, but it's not often a number that the rep has top of mind. But within my org, I make sure that when I do my end of quarter countdown, like 15 days left, gap to forecast. I also have our gap to next quarter's pipeline goal. And I count that down just as much as I do this quarter's revenue.
And to put some of this in context, Kyle, like what's roughly, and I'm sure there's different segments and stuff, but what's roughly the cycle length for deal velocity?
For our net new logo lands, usually 4.5 to 6 months. Would be pretty typical. For expansion, 45 days or so is pretty typical.
Makes sense. You also talked about kind of reducing time to first sale pretty dramatically. I think 65 days to 33 days, that might only seem like, high 20 number of days. That's dramatic, right? Like almost cut in half. What changed in onboarding and broader enablement picture overall to make that happen?
90% of that is territory. The sooner that the rep knows which accounts to focus on, the sooner they're going to have opportunities that can close. So we talked a little bit at the beginning about the propensity aspect. Accounts that are more likely to buy sooner, we get really good at quickly understanding, okay, rep, here's your accounts. Let's go tier them together, teach you what good looks like. So within a week or two of you joining, you just don't have your account book, but you have your accounts tiered out, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. And now we're laser focused on tier 1, where I think historically they didn't have that kind of structure. It was more like randomly picking accounts to call. But when you're in your first few weeks and you're able to call your top propensity accounts, you're much more likely to find a winnable opportunity faster.
What's the next big milestone? I think the importance of the list and the ICP and your territory has even become way more important, because like we have to be more efficient. We have to swing at more strikes, right? Like I find myself talking about the list. What is the next big milestone? So rep comes in the first 10 days. Hey, here's my territory. I have a kind of tiered, planned, etc. What's next? What's the next thing you're looking for? You're like, okay, this person's going to be successful.
I'm looking for evidence that they have the bias for action and they're willing to go fail. Like I see a pretty strong correlation between the reps that have conversations early versus the reps that want to study more and learn more and prep more before being customer facing. The reps that initiate the customer facing work faster usually do better short-term, mid-term, and long-term. Because with a product like LaunchDarkly, it's fairly complex. And the way that we sell to engineers is very dependent on how their architecture is set up, the integrations they're using. It's not something that you're going to master in your first even 6 to 9 months. And so I think the next milestone is this rep willing to run. And then we concurrently work on better understanding who we sell to, what are the problems they have usually, how do they measure their success, how do they define that in their words. Then layer on top of that, how does LaunchDarkly solve those problems? How do we solve it differently? All your typical command the message type language that many sales leaders are familiar with. But I view that as less of a milestone. That's just ongoing. Even my reps that are 2, 3, 4 years in chair, they should still be learning more about the personas, learning more about the new products that we're acquiring and building. But that next milestone is though is this rep one that hit the ground running, having conversations, is getting shut down on cold calls, is getting ripped apart by the senior architect that blows them up for not knowing enough. I want to see that early failure, because that mindset and that approach, that's really easy for me to go build on with knowledge over time.
And then with the team scaling, right? You have multiple managers under you, or even managers of managers. How do you get a sense of, like, how do you enable the frontline leaders to understand, like, okay, yes, they are failing, they are working. Like, how do you do that across a big group of people?
We have awesome analytics around territory penetration, conversations being had. We have ways to track meaningful activity that I've implemented around my good day framework to get a lot of ideas around this. We also have a very public PG wins channel where when somebody has success with a cold call or a cold email conversion, they post how they got there, what happened, what the result was. So it's fairly visible in that way too, from a self call out. And then there's some ongoing one-on-ones with the leaders talking about their ramping reps, where they're seeing progress, where they're seeing challenges. And then the other easy one is just the calendar check. Like I'll periodically pull up reps' calendars, and when I see reps that have a lot of customer meetings, I'm excited. When I see reps that have very few customer meetings and a lot of blank space, I'm a little bit nervous.
It's funny with all this tech, I find myself doing this all the time too, right? You can tell a lot just how many customer calls are we having, right? If you're having 10, 12 plus every week, usually good things are going to happen, right? It's like as simple as that.
Yeah.
You mentioned a good day framework. I know what that is, but I'm assuming a lot of the people listening don't. What is that?
So I found that one of the challenges of sales is it's very easy to fall into micromanagement as a leader, and it's very easy to fall into activity for activity's sake behavior. Early on in my career, I'd get frustrated when I was measured by number of calls made almost exclusively, because I knew that there were some days where calls made were impactful. Other days where it was a waste of time because I was just calling a stale list to get my dial numbers. So my good day framework is an exercise where we work with the AEs and leaders to determine what are the activities that make you most successful. And it's usually things like adding net new prospects to your cadence to make sure that your pipeline is fresh for outreach, having conversations on cold calls and learning more about an account, booking meetings, converting opportunities. But we determine together what makes a successful day. Then we begin to track those things, with the goal being that over time, we know exactly how many inputs equate to quota attainment, and so reps no longer need to worry or wonder, what do I need to do today to be successful? It's very specifically, here's exactly the amount of activities I need to do across high impact activities to be confident I'll hit my number. Because if you go talk to most AEs and you say, hey, what do you need to do every day this week to be on track to hit quota? A very low percentage of reps can actually tell you exactly what. They might know some of the general conversion rates, like cold call conversion or discovery conversion, but very few know exactly how to time block their day down to a science to hit their number. The Good Day Framework is built to track what's most meaningful, track how it actually equates to revenue, and then over a 3 to 6 month period, getting enough data to say, here is what rep A needs to do daily to be on track to hit X percentage of quota.
Love that. Kyle, I want to dig into some of the supporting cast, because a lot of the things you're saying are not so easy in practice, right? Like, how do you do this across multiple reps? Before I do that, there's also been something really interesting happening at LaunchDarkly in a really positive way, is that you mentioned really strong product, singular product, heavy inbound oriented, to now much more of a broader product focus on expansion, new products, platform play. Can you talk about what went into the enablement for that shift?
For the multiple products specifically?
Yeah, multiple products and more of a platform oriented sell, way heavier percentage coming from outbound.
Yeah, so on the platform piece, it's really trying to fight the urge to go make it all about the product. And it just becomes even more important to understand the bigger picture problems. And so if you look back at old LaunchDarkly with feature management, feature flagging, that can solve pretty transactional problems at a transactional price point. You're never going to sell a platform with transactional problems. And so understanding that we need to go uncover with our deals what is the most important problem facing the entire engineering org. Chances are that problem is bigger than simple feature management can solve. But there's also a good chance that the platform play can solve that problem. Then from a PG standpoint, it's just understanding it gives us so many more ways into an account. Where a year ago, now maybe AI wasn't, well, it's still pretty popular, even a year ago. But a year ago, we would have had a hard time setting meetings with a VP of AI or AI architecture or AI product. Now you have a product specifically for developing on AI. It's a lot easier talk track now to go earn a seat at the table to begin a conversation. And so learning how to tweak your initial pitch to across different value drivers, then tying to the product is valuable. And I'll add that last piece is really critical. We did a whole refresh of our value framework and value drivers, because I never want our reps calling into companies, going through list by list of the new products. I want us to in discovery around the different value drivers, and then discovering which of those is most important. Then we can go in with a bit more of the product-centric approach.
Kyle, for people that maybe aren't familiar, you said value driver a couple times here. What exactly is that?
A value driver is something that generally exists in an account with or without your company. So it's important to them and it can kind of stand alone, but then it should tie back something that you do very, very well. Usually value drivers are going to tie it back to either making money, saving money, or mitigating risk. And different companies have different ways of phrasing that, because the way that your company helps a company make money is going to be different than how we do. If you have value drivers that don't tie back to one of those three things, then you need to probably find a different company to sell for.
Yeah. Let's get in, Kyle, to some of the team building, scaling parts. So you took an org, I believe, from 8 ramped reps, scaled it up to 40 while improving productivity. You talked a lot about some of the inputs there. What were some of the supporting cast or other roles that you had to bring in? And how do you kind of sequence that? Like, for instance, I know you have Laura, who focused specifically on pipeline programs, which I think is really smart. And I'm surprised not more popular. I'd love to hear how that happened and some of the other supporting cast.
Yeah, so the 8 to 40 was at Mongo, and it was a very different supporting structure than I have at LaunchDarkly, and I think LaunchDarkly actually does a better job with it, where Mongo had phenomenal support around leadership development and enablement, really good sales enablement resources. There wasn't as much on the system side, and I found that when it comes to great PG programs, great sales programs, having the right approach and framework, the right systems, and then the right enablement of the systems has been critical. And so Laura is a great example where we can be in our one-on-one. She's the one that takes my angry ranting and rambling and hypotheticals and grandiose ideas and then goes and takes it and actually makes it happen with our tooling and systems to build it out. And so that has been a phenomenally important resource. Then I also, when I think about resources, a big part of it is within my own org with the AEs and the leaders. And so a big reason for our recent success has been the fact that a lot of my most tenured AEs are mentoring and helping new reps with the historic knowledge they have of how to sell LaunchDarkly, our territories, our older tools. I've always been very fortunate to have incredible AEs in my org that are willing to be a resource, and that's basically supersized enablement in a lot of ways. And then the frontline leaders play a massive role too, to go drive adoption of processes, drive accountability of processes. But if you give me Laura, the great reps that I've got, and the great leaders that I have, it's going to be hard for me to screw it up.
Was it as simple, Kyle, as some of the reps that have been there for a while have had some success at tenure? You mentioned how you kind of earned the right. You delivered some quick wins for them, right? And had some great details around that. Do you do anything else formally or informally to encourage some of that knowledge sharing, or like you said, kind of getting enablement at scale?
It's something that I can't really take credit for, right? Because from day one, I've said, hey, I want our culture to be one of win sharing and teaching. But everybody knows that what the VP puts in their culture slide isn't the culture. It's a goal, it's aspirational. But I think what I've done an okay job of is just recognizing it. Like at our last QBR, when I was recognizing top performers, I had so it was my most important slide for me at least. And I just walked through all the reps. Some had missed last quarter, some had hit. I was like, these are the reps that are setting the standard for culture because they're willing to share, they're willing to mentor, they're willing to encourage. And I just made it incredibly clear to everybody how valuable that is. And then I do everything within my power to reward that financially as well through how we think about a lot of different areas. But man, like part of that, I can do a really good job as a sales leader, but if you don't have the kind of high integrity, incredible people that I'm lucky to work with, it all falls flat. And so if anything, this is just a shout out to these reps at LaunchDarkly, that if it weren't for them buying in and being the incredible people that they are, we would not have nearly as much success as quickly. And that's something that a leader can't take credit for. That's just having high integrity people on your team.
Love it. Kyle, we were talking about this a little bit before I hit go and record. You built a sizable brand around sales introverts. Why do you think the sales world needs that message, or what have you been out to accomplish with that?
It started because early in my career, I generally felt like I had a ceiling on my success because I was so different than the perceived top performers in sales.
In what way?
All the top performers were the ones that loved the client dinners and golf trips, and they were very loud and very outgoing, very charismatic, and very seemingly extroverted. Now, by the way, charismatic, sometimes loud does not mean that you're an extrovert. There's a lot more to it than that. But the perception of sales is extroverts have the advantage. And I still see this all the time, especially like on Twitter and LinkedIn. People say, oh yeah, introverts just can't sell as well. And so I think part of it was just wanting to break that perception, because introverts are just as capable at selling really well and being great sales leaders as extroverts. And so that was the main premise of it. I just wanted to be an example that looked like you can hate events, but still be good at them. You can not like social activities, but still be good at them. And you can be drained by a lot of calls in a day, but still be a great salesperson. You can have all the introvert tendencies, but you can still be great at sales. And it's resonated with a good amount of people, which I'm grateful for.
Amazing. And I told you this, I think, before we hit record, but I get a lot of value for it. I think your ability to approach problems that everyone's dealing with on the sales side and give frameworks is the top out there. So, and I know it takes a lot of time to do that. So thank you on behalf of the broader sales community.
Thank you.
Kyle, I saw something you wrote about average reps in great orgs often outperform great reps and average orgs, right? I agree with you here, but I would imagine with A, your track record, and B, just the way you critically think, I would imagine a lot of people that have worked with you, for you, come to you for career advice. What advice do you find yourself giving when people are working through different opportunities?
Yeah, so I'll start with the environment being most critical. I just got this question just yesterday. I think it's like rank these things in order, like rep skill set, market climate, product market fit. It's like, well, first product market fit, because you can be the best rep in the world, but if you don't have product market fit, you're going to struggle. Man, the environment matters. And now a lot of reps, I don't want to get controversial here. A lot of reps will say, well, I can't really control my environment, but I think often you can. Like when reps say, well, I'm not having success because the companies I work for suck, there's ways that you can battle and try to find a way to hire quality companies over time. And I urge people to do that from a career standpoint, because your career is not often going to grow faster than your company is able to grow and support. There are incredibly phenomenally talented sales leaders and sales reps that are not making very much money because they're at the wrong company, at the wrong time, at the wrong phase, either too early or too late. And so my first advice is assess your environment. If you put everything into it, if you get as good as you can, if you do everything within your control to succeed, do you have a high ceiling, or are there real constraints around the product quality, company quality holding you back? If there are, then you need to fix the environment first and foremost. Then I'll give you one more. So the environment matters. If you look at the companies I've worked for and you go look at how we're rated by our customers, go look at the most recent G2 crowd for LaunchDarkly. Like, I've never seen that big of a gap. I'm smart enough to know that I'm not good enough at sales to sell a bad product. I don't accidentally find myself becoming a great product. That's very intentional, right? But then the second piece is the sooner that you master the internal locus of control, the better off you're going to be. I think a lot of people that struggle in their career are always finding another reason why they can't have success. My sales leader doesn't develop me. My territory isn't good enough. I haven't gotten lucky inbound. There's always another reason for why they're not as good as they think they should be, and it's never, ever their fault. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't things outside of sellers' control that influence us. I just talked about how important the environment is. But the best reps and leaders I've always worked with have always had the internal locus of control. They feel like their success or failure is largely up to them and how well they take advantage of their circumstances. So my other piece of career advice is find the best environment you can and then take complete ownership of your success and failure. Because as long as you think you're dependent on other people for your success, you're probably right. And nobody's going to care more about your progression in your career than you do. That's a really bad combination.
How did you learn that last part? Did someone teach you that? Did you come to it over time? And what I mean is the locus of control part.
Oh yeah. I was early in my career and I was not having success. And it was in my mind because I didn't have as good of customers. He just got that great inbound. Of course he's going to hit quota. I'm not going to hit quota. I wasn't having success and I was not willing to, one, put everything I had into success because I was concerned, I was scared that if I do everything I can and I still fail, then I have to actually accept that I'm a failure, which that's hard. If you're not trying as hard as you can, you always have the mental out of, well, I'm not as good as I could be because I'm not trying. I could be that good if I tried harder. It's a mental hedge. And then the comparison piece. And so my second line leader at the time sat me down, was like, Kyle, you got to run in your own lane. You are so worried about what everybody else is doing that you can't get out of your own way. You have your territory. You have your job. Go focus on your job and do the best you can there and see what happens. And I was like, all right, let's try that. And then ever since then, I've tried my best. Here's my lane. I'm going to sprint in that lane as hard as I can, but I'm not going to worry so much about the things that I can't control. And over time, especially in sales, if you do that, over a long enough time horizon, the cream will rise to the crop. I've seen reps get lucky, have great years. I have never seen a rep luck their way into a decade of success.
I started my career at SAP, and there's one rep that has been there, and he had like 7 years in a row of high earning years. And we're all the people we started together. The first year or two, you're like, this has to be luck, right? No one does it for 7 years consistently, right? There's something there. So I agree with that. Last two questions I have for you, Kyle, and this has been amazing. So we talked a little bit about kind of choosing the right opportunity and how you approach that. From the pure leader perspective, not the rep perspective, how much do you think about like phase dependent of a company, like exactly the right revenue bands, et cetera? How much does that go into your equation?
I've learned a lot the last few years on that. It's extremely important, but there's also not one right phase for everybody. You kind of got to know the problems that you like to solve. And so I'll add to that on the environment piece for leaders specifically. And so when I was looking at LaunchDarkly, it had my non-negotiables, great product, large market. Then it also had massive opportunity because their biggest problems were things that I am pretty good at solving. And so when you're a leader, you're looking for product market fit and then problem you fit. Because if you go to a company where the problems are ones that you're not good at solving, you're going to be pretty frustrated a lot of the time. But if they're problems that you're good at solving and you get to be the person that goes in and solves big problems for the company, that's really good for your career. And the problems the company is facing is directly correlated usually with the phase that the company is at in their trajectory. And so for me, I love this late stage startup phase because there's definitely product market fit. There's underlying systems and processes. I have resources, call me lazy, but I like to have resources to support a lot of the things that we're trying to do. But it's also early enough where when I want to go make a change, I don't need to go write a memo and have it circulated amongst 73 people that's going to take me 13 months to get approval to add a Salesforce object, right? That's not a good phase for me. That's not my happy place. But yeah, man, the problem leader fits, I think is something that more leaders should think about when they think about career progression, career journey.
I love that. I remember my previous company was like 0 to 25 million, brought in a COO, and it was clear he was going to become the CEO. And I said, what'd you see about this, right? You have millions of opportunities. Said, I love this stage. It has the big hard things that are hard to solve for, good product, big market. And it's the right level of messed up. And the things where they're bad, I'm very good at. And I was like, wow, that makes a lot of sense. Last question for you, Kyle, as we wrap here is, I don't know if this is true or not. Maybe it's partially because sales introvert or how you carry yourself, but you seem a lot less stressed and a lot less overwhelmed than a lot of other sales leaders at a high growth company. How do you do that? How do you go about that? What have you learned on how to deal with that and approach it?
Yeah, it's been a journey for sure, because early in my career, I was very stressed, but my perspective has shifted. I look at it as I am very fortunate to have the problems that I have. I'm very fortunate to have the stress that I have. Being in sales leadership, we get paid an awful lot of money to do things that at the end of the day just really aren't that big of a deal. And so I tell my own team this all the time, like, this is just a job. We want to be good at it. We want to provide a good life for our families. We want to be competitive. We want to be the best of what we do. But at the end of the day, it's not worth being highly stressed over because it's just a job. It's a means to the end. And my identity, my life's purpose, the things I want to be known for, the legacy I want to leave, none of those things are going to be tied to my job. And so that perspective has helped a lot because that means I can go do the best I can in whatever outcome. Like if I do so badly that LaunchDarkly does a public post on LinkedIn about how terrible Kyle Asay is as a sales leader, I can live with that. If I do a great job and I help the organization grow and scale with a lot of success, that's cool. That's a lot better of an outcome, but it's not going to make my life by any means. My happiness, my joy, everything that's most important to me is tied completely at this point to faith and family. My job supports those things, but it's not my identity.
Kyle, there's some gold in here. I really appreciate you taking the time, share some of your learnings, frameworks, hard-earned, right, learnings. And I love the way you approach it on all fronts. So I appreciate you taking some time.
Of course. It was a great conversation. I appreciate the preparation for it.
All right. Take care, Kyle. Thanks for listening to Cracking Outbound. If this was helpful, let us know by messaging me, Todd Bustler, on LinkedIn, and share this episode with a friend that you think will be interested. If you want more resources about building and scaling all things outbound, you can sign up for our newsletter at champify.io/blog.